And my concern is that when you escalate to a level of severe violence, you are still, in this case, where we're talking about an emergency protection order, you still put this image in your head. You have a woman standing on the street with a piece of paper going, please don't hurt me, shoot me, knife me, club me. I have an emergency protection order. You can't do that. Not very effective, is it? And that's the bottom line. So you do have a legal piece of paper, but it really only works if the person that is coming to attack you believes that they should cease doing something because of that legal piece of paper. Now, it often flows back to us, and I know there tends to be complaints about judge-made law, but frankly, whenever you hear that argument, it means we didn't do a very good job as legislators, because we didn't make it clear enough what we were intending, and we didn't write the legislation well enough to get rid of those inconsistencies and unintended consequences. So that's what I'm asking for here, is a very careful look at this. I'm a nice middle-income gal, very plain household. My parents were teachers, nothing special there. You know, I had a good upbringing, went to public schools. I'm a pretty average Albertan, and I obey the rules. And I obey the rules until I perceive an unfairness in it that is so one-sided that I'm going to start to fight to change the rules. And I think that's what we need to make sure that we're not creating, is that kind of situation. So I'm being heckled, I'm sure, with great fondness from the other side. I appreciate the heckling. Thank you for listening to what I'm saying, because it is an indicator you were. But I think we need to be very cautious with what we're going ahead with here. Sustainability fund. You know, I keep making that mistake because, and for some of the members that are fairly new to this House that were elected after 2004, you've got to forgive me rolling my eyes at you all the time, but honestly, I sat in this House and listened to Ken Nicholl talk about the Stability Fund until I thought my eyeballs were going to fall out. But he was the one that kept saying, this is what we've got to do. While we're making new money, while we're making money from our resource base, we need to be putting that aside to level out our traditional cyclical economy. See, I can still hear that stuff. I sound like him when I'm talking. And he was absolutely right. And the government took it and takes credit for it now. And you know what? I don't care. I really am just interested in best practices. If that's what's actually going to move us forward and make a better Alberta for all of us, I don't care who gets the credit. I just want to see it put in place. So I notice lots of people now from different parties are talking about indexing AISH payments to the cost of living. Great! I can't remember who in my caucus started talking about that. I really don't care now. If I can get the Wild Rose on board with that and the Conservatives on board with it, the NDs already were, yippee, let's do it. So it should be about best practices for our constituents, not about some set ideological position that doesn't allow you to move from it. And thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Environment Minister protested last week that I was being unfair when I questioned his ministry's budget priorities. But since 2007, when this administration took over, the environment budget has plummeted 30%, while the communications portion of the environment budget is up 60%. Now, that sure looks to me like propaganda is more important than action in this ministry. But to the minister, if it's not about propaganda, then why is the action part of the budget dropped and the communication part increased over the last 4 years?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to 3 hours of intense debate on my budget in this very chamber on, I think it's the 22nd of March. And these kinds of in-depth questions, I think, are much more appropriately dealt with at that time.
The Honourable Member.
Yeah, question period's no time to ask something of the minister. And that's the role of government. That's part of what government does, is that they provide what business will not do because business doesn't make a profit doing it. So things like police forces and fire and providing municipal services and things like that, there is a role for government. And I know that my colleagues opposite think there isn't and they want smaller government, blah, blah. Okay, fair enough. I disagree. I think there is a role for government, and one of those roles is environmental protection, consumer protection. That's what it needs to do. It needs to give a level playing field. It needs to be able to set limits on what the private sector can do. And a profit is not a dirty word. Lots of people, it's not the only word. And often I sit in here and I listen to people go, we've got to grow, we've got to make more money, money's the bottom line, it's all about money. No, it isn't. Most of us in this world work, that's true, we work to make money to do other things. Money is not the only thing. Profit is not the only word. There's other things that are important to Albertans, like clean air, like fresh water, like recreational opportunities, like spending time with their family. So money and profit is not a dirty word. It's just not the only word in the Alberta that I see. One of the things that this government stopped doing, and I understand why they stopped doing it, because it was embarrassing. Okay, fair enough. But you know what? Woman up here. You know, there's all kinds of analogies and rude things I could say about find some courage. For heaven's sake, get over it. I don't care if you're embarrassed. But these are publishing annually the statistics of the numbers in the shelters. And I can't even remember how long ago it was that the government stopped publishing the numbers of women who are turned away from the shelters. And we know now, if you can dig it out from places if you're determined enough, but that shouldn't be how it works, that we turn away more people that come to shelters than we're able to find space for them. And I know that's embarrassing for the government. Tough. Because the rest of us need to know that. We need to know what those numbers are and how many of those people are out there and looking for assistance, and because it reflects on us. And it gives us all an out. It lets all of us off the hook because, well, hey, they're all looked after, right? No, they're not. And I think we're somewhere in the tens of thousands range of women that are turned away from shelter spaces in Alberta at this point. And I don't mean 30,000, I mean 13,000, if I remember the last statistic that I heard, but I'm out of date by a couple of years there. Because I think we all need to know that information to understand how large the issue is in our province. My father was a welder, so he never had the zen of wood, and he didn't teach me how to use those kinds of tools. Welding, I know. How to work with metal, I know. All of that stuff, acetylene torches, yeah, I'm good. But he failed me as a father because he never taught me how to use the rest of the tools in the toolbox. And I'm reminded constantly when I look at this concept of carbon capture and storage that it's one tool in a toolbox. And I can't think of anybody that would have one tool in their toolbox. You'd open it up and there would be a wrench. And that's it. That's their whole toolbox. I can't imagine that, because I'm sure if any of you have ever tried to take the only tool you had, let's call it a wrench, and hammer a nail into a wall, not very effective. Not the tool that you needed to do that. And if anybody else was around that really did use tools, you were in big trouble for using a wrench to try and whack a nail into a wall. You're supposed to use, well, it's true, isn't it? You're supposed to use the proper tools. So I can't imagine just having one tool in the toolbox. And persistently, I see that as the approach from this government. 240 megatons compared to 5 megatons yearly that we'd be able to stuff underground by 2015. So I'm thinking, how many years is it going to take us just to deal with what we produced in 2005 at the rate of 5 megatons a year when we're trying to deal with 240 megatons from 2005. You're starting to get a sense of how this is not adding up. But you don't need to do this. You know, you already have your vote. You know that you're eventually going to win this. What does it matter to you to have to sit here for a few minutes longer and listen to some people that want to say something about this bill? And clearly, there is an appetite for it outside of this chamber. Maybe that's what you're worried about. Maybe that's what you're trying to subvert and avoid, is that discussion that's taking place elsewhere. It's your choice. It's the government's choice in the scheduling of this bill to put this on at night. We could do it during the day. We could do it tomorrow. We could do it Wednesday. We could do it Thursday. But I think the government likes to put it on at night so that it can do things like this in the middle of the night when there's not so many people around to notice it. And conveniently, well, it's a debatable motion, so I invite people to get involved and get engaged in the democratic process. But I would argue that there is no need at this point for the government to have to bring this in. It's a matter of a few more speakers at most before this bill reaches the end of its, and I think it's wrong to be taking away that opportunity from the leader of the third party in particular. Everything I've said has been on point here, boys. You want to argue? Get up and argue. But so far, I think I fail to see where the government has need to invoke 49 and bring it into play in this case. What's it going to cost you? Another couple of minutes, 45 minutes, and the debate is done. But you will turn this into a debate about how the government had to be heavy-handed and shut down debate when there was one or two people left to speak on this. For shame. Why on earth would you need to do that?